The night is quiet in Pretoria. I used to think quiet meant safe. I know better now. I am standing in the hallway of my own home, holding all three of them, Minjun pressed against my left side, Teo gripping my wrist with both hands, Seoyeon silent and watchful the way he always is, the way that breaks my heart because he learned that stillness from his father. Outside, there are black cars I did not call. Men in dark suits who do not speak, and a phone on my kitchen table, buzzing with a number I deleted 5 years ago but never forgot. Han Dongwook, I press my lips to the top of Seojun's head. I close my eyes for exactly 2 seconds because that is all I allow myself. Then I open them. I thought I had buried this life in Seoul. I thought the $5 million he offered me to abandon these 3 boys was the ending. I was wrong. The Korean mafia just found my triplets. I should never have taken that job. I told myself it was just a building. 42 floors of glass and steel on the edge of Gangnam-gu, the kind of structure that costs more per square meter than most people earn in a decade. My client was a Hong Kong-based firm, or so the paperwork said. They needed a security audit on the facility, entry points, CCTV architecture, personnel protocols, standard work. The kind I had done 100 times. I flew into Incheon on a Tuesday morning in October. By Thursday night, I knew the building did not belong to any Hong Kong firm. It took me 6 hours of cross-referencing access logs and shell company registrations to trace the ownership to a name I had heard only in the kind of conversations serious people stop having when someone new enters the room. Hugo Syndicate, Black Tiger, roughly translated. One of 3 major crime organizations operating across Seoul, Bisan, and Incheon, with reach into Tokyo and Shanghai that nobody with a badge could fully document. They moved money territory and leveraged the way other corporations moved product, quietly, precisely, brutally. I packed my bag. I was in the elevator, heading to the lobby, already calculating the fastest route back to the airport, when the doors opened on the 31st floor and he stepped in. Han Dongwook, I did not know his name yet. I only knew that he was tall in a way that made the elevator feel smaller, dressed in charcoal gray that looked like it had been stitched specifically for his body, and that he looked at me, not at my badge, not at my bag, at me. With the kind of calm that belongs either to very enlightened people or very dangerous ones, he spoke first. The audit team left this morning, he said, in English that carried soul in every consonant. You're still here. It was not a question. I kept my face neutral. Slight delay. He tilted his head slightly. A millimeter, maybe, barely perceptible. The way a predator adjusts before it decides whether to move. There were no flight delays out of Incheon today, he said. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Neither of us moved. This is the moment, I told myself. Walk out, don't speak, don't explain, just go. I turned to face him directly. Then I suppose you already know why I'm still here, I said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not warmth, not yet, not ever, something as simple as that, more like recognition. Like he was seeing something he had not expected and was deciding what to do with it. Come, he said, and God help me, I went. We sat in a room on the 31st floor that could have been a boardroom in any legitimate building in the world. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of Seoul spreading out below us like a circuit board lit at night. He poured tea. He did not call security. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked me what I had found. I told him the truth, which was probably the most dangerous thing I had ever done. I told him the Eastern Access Corridor had a 6-second blind spot in the CCTV rotation at every hour mark. I told him the biometric system on the server level could be bypassed with a duplicated thermal signature. I told him his people were good, but not as careful as they believed. He listened to every word without writing a single thing down. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Who hired you?" he asked. "I was told Hong Kong," I said. "I don't believe that anymore." "Neither do I," he said. And something in the way he said it made my blood run cold, because it meant that someone had sent me here without my knowing. Someone who wanted a map of his vulnerabilities delivered by a person who had no idea what she was carrying. I was a courier, a blind one. "Am I in danger?" I asked. He looked at me across the table. "That depends on what you do next," he said. He did not say it with menace. That was the part I could not shake afterward. There was no threat in his voice at all. Just fact, the way doctors deliver diagnoses. Just the weight of a man who has never needed to perform his own danger because the danger was simply true. I should have left Seoul that night. Instead, I sat across from Han Dong-wook for 4 more hours, and by the time his driver took me back to my hotel, I was no longer thinking about the airport. I was thinking about his eyes, stupid, so unbearably stupid. 3 days later, my Hong Kong client called to ask what I had found. I lied to them, told them the building was clean, nothing unusual. That night, someone put a tracking device under my hotel room door. It was not from Dong-wook's people, it was from whoever sent me there in the first place. And I had just made myself a problem for both sides. I stayed in Seoul for 3 more weeks. I told myself it was because leaving suddenly would look worse than staying. I told myself I needed to understand who had hired me before I could safely disappear. I told myself a great many things in those weeks, lying in hotel rooms, walking the Han River at dusk, answering Dong-wook's calls on a number I should not have given him. He was careful with me. That was what I had not expected. Not from a man who ran an empire built on fear. He was careful, deliberate, the way someone handles something they are afraid of breaking. We met in places that were not his buildings, not his restaurants, not his world. A small poyeongmache under a bridge where the tteokbokki was too spicy and the Ajema owner clearly recognized him and said nothing. A bookshop in Insadong where he pulled a volume off the shelf and read me a passage in Korean, then translated it without being asked. A rooftop in Mapoguatu in the morning, where the city below us was all amber light and noise, and he stood close enough that I could hear him breathe. "You could have left," he said one night. "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" I didn't answer. He didn't push. That was the thing about him, he never pushed. He simply waited, with a patience that felt infinite and unnerving, and somehow that was worse than any pressure would have been. I learned things about him in those weeks, pieces, fragments he let fall in the gaps of silences. That he had been inside the syndicate since he was 19. That his father had built Hugo from nothing and left it to him like a gift he never asked for. That he had a habit of reading until 3 in the morning and sleeping for 4 hours and acting like that was enough. That he ate the same breakfast every day, barley rice, miso, a boiled egg, because routine was the only thing that had ever made him feel safe. That beneath the stillness, beneath the cold precision that made grown men lower their eyes when he entered a room, there was something that had been waiting a very long time to be seen by someone who was not afraid of it. I was afraid of it. I looked at it anyway. The night I crossed the line, it was raining, November in Seoul. The kind of rain that doesn't announce itself. It's just suddenly everywhere, soaking through coats, filling the gutters, blurring the neon into watercolors. We had been at dinner, the kind of dinner that had stopped feeling like information gathering weeks ago and had started feeling like something I had no appropriate vocabulary for. We were in the car. His driver had stopped at a light. And Dong-wook had turned to look at me, and I had looked back. And every single rational thought I had constructed over 3 weeks, he is dangerous. This is not your world. You do not know what he has done. You should be on a flight. You should be anywhere but here. Every single one of them went quiet, not gone, just quiet. He reached across the space between us and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Just that, just one small gesture with his hand, and I felt it in every part of me. Rethabile, he said, like my name was something he had been keeping safe. I kissed him first. I want to be clear about that. Whatever happened after, whatever I carried, whatever I lost, whatever those 3 boys cost me in sleepless years and borrowed names and the constant low hum of fear, I kissed him first. The rest of that night I will keep for myself. But I will say this, for the hours it lasted, I forgot that the world outside was the kind that broke people. I forgot that I was a stranger in his city, that I had enemies I couldn't name, that the man holding me with such impossible gentleness commanded an organization that ran on violence and silence and consequences. I forgot everything. That is how it happens, I think. Not in moments of stupidity. In moments of feeling so profoundly seen that you stop caring about the cost. I moved out of the hotel and into a small apartment near Buchan. Not his apartment, I was clear about that. But one he arranged quietly through a name that didn't connect back to him. I told myself it was practical, that it was safer, that it was temporary. I told myself these things every morning and stopped believing them by noon. For 2 months we lived in the space between his world and mine, never fully inside either. He came to me in evenings when his work released him. Sometimes he arrived at midnight, sometimes at 8. Sometimes he called from somewhere I couldn't track and said only I can't tonight in a voice that told me someone was in the room with him and listening. I learned not to ask where he'd been. He learned not to apologize for it. It was its own kind of understanding, fragile, imperfect, real. And then one morning in December, I sat on the edge of the bathtub with a test in my hand, and every single fragile, imperfect, real thing we had built cracked straight down the center. 3 lines. The test showed 3 lines. I did not move for a very long time. I hid it for 2 months. 2 months of watching him, measuring him, looking for the man who would be safe for a child to know. And the more I watched, the more I understood. The syndicate owned every hour of his life. And Park Soo-hyun, his second, his shadow, the man who never looked at me without calculation in his eyes, had started watching me more closely than before. Like he already knew, like he was already deciding what to do about it. I found out it was triplets at 9 weeks. The doctor, a private practitioner in a clinic in Yongsan that Dongwook did not know I was using, showed me the ultrasound with the careful expression of someone delivering news they cannot predict the reception of. 3 heartbeats, 3 small impossible blurs on a screen. I sat in the plastic chair afterward for a long time, staring at a poster on the wall about prenatal vitamins, thinking, I cannot do this here. I cannot do this inside his world. I kept the secret for another month. I watched Dongwook more carefully than I had ever watched anything. I watched him take a phone call that left his jaw tight for the rest of the night. I watched Park Soo-hyun place a tablet in front of him at dinner, a tablet with a photograph on it, a man I didn't know, and Dongwook looked at it and said 3 words I couldn't hear, and the man in the photograph was apparently gone by morning. I stopped asking myself if I was overreacting. I made a plan. I would go back to Johannesburg. I had a cousin in Pretoria, Aunt Lassetti, my mother's older sister, the woman who had raised me after my parents passed, the woman who asked no questions and opened her door without warning to anyone carrying Blamini blood. I would tell Dongwook it was work, a contract, a month, maybe 2. I would be gone before I was showing. I would never come back. It was a clean plan. It fell apart on a Tuesday. I came home to the apartment to find Dongwook sitting at the kitchen table. Not unusual, he had a key. What was unusual was the way he looked at me when I walked in. Not cold, not warm, something else, something I had never seen in him before and did not have a name for. Something that looked almost like grief, but harder. Like grief that had already decided not to stay. On the table between us was a manila envelope. Sit down, he said. I sat. I know, he said. About the clinic, about the appointment. About what they found, my hands were very still on the table. I had learned that from him, stillness as control. How long have you known? I asked. 3 weeks, 3 weeks. He had known for 3 weeks and said nothing, watched me keep my secret, and waited for what? For this moment. For a table and an envelope, and that expression I still couldn't name. There are 3, I said, not a question. 3 boys, he said. Yes, the room was very quiet. He pushed the envelope across the table. This is $5 million, he said. American, transferred to an account in your name. It is yours. Entirely and irrevocably yours, the moment you sign the document inside. I did not touch the envelope, and the document says what? I asked that you were never here, that there were no children, that any future claim of paternity or syndicate connection will be met with full legal denial. He paused. That you take them and go and we never speak again. There it was, $5 million, 3 newborn boys. One man who could not look me fully in the eye as he said it. I thought about screaming. I thought about crying. I thought about asking him how it felt to put a number on his own sons. Instead, I asked, is this what you want? He was quiet for a long time. What I want, he said finally, is irrelevant. This is what is necessary. Necessary. I stood up. I did not take the envelope. I walked to the bedroom, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I was very quiet for a very long time. I delivered alone. Aunt Lessadie's contact in a private maternity clinic outside Pretoria. A doctor who owed her a favor from 20 years ago and asked nothing except that the paperwork be handled carefully. 14 hours, 3 boys, Minjun first, then Seoyeon, then Teo. That last one coming into the world like he was already annoyed at how long it had taken. I held all 3 of them in the dark of that small room, and I said their names out loud for the first time, and I made them a promise I did not yet know if I could keep. I will not let this world find you. 3 days later, Dongwook's lawyer called. The offer had been raised to $7 million. I did not pick up. I had already chosen a new surname, a new address, a school district 3 neighborhoods away from where I actually lived. I had already begun. 5 years passed. Minjun loved football and hated mornings. Seoyeon was the quiet one, watchful, precise, unsettling in his calm. Teo was loud enough for all 3 of them and spent most of his waking hours finding creative ways to climb things he was not supposed to climb. They were, objectively, the most exhausting and most extraordinary people I had ever known. I worked remote contracts under a consulting name that did not connect to Rethabile Dlamini. I drove them to school. I made their lunches. I sat with Seoyeon when the nightmares came, the ones he couldn't describe but woke up from with wide eyes and shallow breath. I taught Minjun to dribble in the backyard. I let Teo climb the mango tree as long as I was watching. I built a life. I built it out of nothing and stubbornness and the specific determination of a woman who had looked at $5 million and walked away. I told myself it was enough. On the first Tuesday of March, I was in the school pickup line when my phone buzzed. A number I had deleted 5 years ago, Han Dongwook. My hands didn't shake. I was proud of that. I looked at the message he had sent. It was 3 words, I found you. That evening, I drove home by a different route, parked 2 streets away. Walked the last block with all 3 boys close to me, scanning every shadow. The black car I didn't recognize was already parked outside Aunt Lessadie's gate. And standing beside it, hands in his pockets, 5 years older and somehow more dangerous than I remembered, was Han Dongwook. He looked at me, then he looked past me, at them. And something broke open in his face that I had never seen there before. He looked at them the way a man looks at something he had convinced himself did not exist. like reality had just walked up and corrected him. Minjun was holding a football under his arm, dirt on his knees from the schoolyard. Teo was mid-sentence about something that had happened at lunch, voice loud enough for the entire street to hear. Soo-yeon, my quiet one, had already gone still. He was looking at the stranger beside the black car with those careful, measuring eyes that were so much like his father's it sometimes stopped my breath. I stepped in front of them, not dramatically, not with a speech. Just between him and them, the way I had always known I would be if this moment ever came. Boys, I said, keeping my voice even. Go inside with Aunt Lysetti now. Teo started to protest. Minjun grabbed his arm. Seo-yeon looked at me for one long second, reading my face the way he always did, then turned and shepherded his brothers through the gate without a word. The gate clicked shut. Dong-wook had not moved 5 years. He was wearing it differently than I expected. Not softer, not harder exactly, but denser, like the years had compressed something in him rather than loosened it. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair was slightly longer. He had the look of a man who had stopped sleeping well some time ago and had made his peace with it. He was still the most controlled person I had ever seen in my life. And he was furious, not loud, not gesturing. Just the air around him had a different quality, the way the atmosphere changes before a serious storm. Something held entirely in check by will alone. Rethabal, he said, just my name. The way he had always said it, like he was keeping it safe. I hated how much it still did to me. You need to leave, I said. No, he said. This is not Seoul. This is my home. You do not walk up to my home. I have been looking for 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years. That stopped me. I had assumed it was sooner. I had assumed the money, the lawyers, the silence. I had assumed all of it meant he had moved on, filed it away, closed the account, and gone back to his empire. That was what I needed to believe to function. 3 years, I repeated. Park Soo-hyun buried the trail, he said. I did not know you had run until for months after you were gone. I did not know about the clinic in Pretoria until 18 months ago. And I did not find this address until last week. He said it without accusation, without anger at me specifically. Just facts delivered in that level voice, and somehow that was worse than shouting. You sent your lawyer, I said twice. The offer went up to 7 million. That was not me. The quiet was enormous. Excuse me, I said. The lawyer was Soo-hyun's action, he said, not mine. I did not know about the second contact until much later. I looked at him. I had spent 5 years building the architecture of my survival on a specific version of that night, Han Dong-wook, $5 million, go and never come back. I had lived inside that story. I had made it load-bearing. The envelope on the table, I said slowly, the document. That was him, Dong-wook said, prepared by him. Placed by him, I was told you had agreed. That you had taken the money, that you had already left. The street was very quiet around us. Somewhere inside the house, I could hear Taeo's voice, high and insistent, and Aunt Lesetti's low rumble answering him. You believed him, I said. Something moved across Dong-wook's face. For 3 months, he said, yes, and then I stopped believing things I had not verified myself. He reached into his jacket. I tensed, automatic, 5 years of caution, but he only produced a folded paper. He held it out. I did not take it. The financial records, he said. The account the money was transferred to. It is not yours. It never was. It is a shell account registered to one of Soo-hyun's holding companies in Macau. The $5 million. The $5 million had never been an offer. It had been a performance. A story told to a man who was too far inside his own world to check the details in time. I sat down on the low wall beside my own gate, which was not elegant, but my legs had made the decision independently. "Where is Soo-hyun now?" I asked. Dong-wook's face did something I could not fully interpret. "Detained," he said. For now, for now." "Dong-wook," I said. "What does for now mean?" He looked at me. "It means I wanted to speak to you first," which told me everything about how this conversation was going to end, and nothing about whether I was ready for it. Inside the house, Seo-jun's voice joined his brother's. Calm, steady, and 5 years old. Dong-wook heard it. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 moment. "I want to see them," he said. Not demanded, wanted, like a man who had spent 3 years learning the difference between the two. "I know," I said. "Will you let me?" The question cost him something. I could see it. Han Dong-wook, who had never needed to ask permission for anything in his adult life, standing outside my gate in Pretoria asking me if he could see his sons. I looked at him for a long time. "Not tonight," I said finally. "Tonight you go wherever you're staying. Tomorrow we talk just us, not them, and you tell me everything, all of it, no omissions. No Soo-hyun's version, no lawyer's version, yours, and then." He asked, "And then I decide." I said, "I am still the one who decides." He held my gaze. "Yes," he said simply, "you are." He turned and got back in the black car. It pulled away quietly into the Pretoria evening. I sat on the wall for another 5 minutes. Then I went inside, where Tae-oh was demanding to know who the tall man was, where Min-jun was pretending not to be curious while being very obviously curious, and where Seo-yeon was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at nothing with an expression I was only just beginning to understand. He looked like his father trying not to feel something. God, I thought, they are so much his. That night, after the boys were asleep, I found a second car parked at the end of the road. Not Dong-wook's driver, different plates, different energy. I stood at the window in the dark and I understood. Soo-hyun was not only detained, he had people watching. And if he knew Dong-wook had found me, he already knew about the boys. Which meant the danger had not ended, it had simply changed its shape. We met the next morning at a cafe 3 kilometers from my house. I put my phone on the table between us, recorder running. He looked at it, said nothing. "Tell me everything," I said. "All of it." He did. Park Soo-hyun had known about me before Dong-wook ever did. He had pulled my file the night I ran unauthorized searches on the building. He knew who sent me a rival faction inside Hugo, using me as an unknowing courier to map security vulnerabilities. Soo-hyun let it play out to identify the leak inside the syndicate. Then I stayed. Then Dong-wook started meeting me for tea and bookshops and rooftops at 2 in the morning. And Soo-hyun, who had given 15 years of his life to the syndicate, began to understand that this was different. He got to my doctor before Dong-wook did, found out about the triplets first, prepared the envelope, drafted the document, transferred money to his own shell account, and staged that entire Tuesday night, choosing a moment when Dong-wook was exhausted and at his coldest. He told Dong-wook, "She already knows, she wants to leave, let her go." And Dong-wook believed him. For 3 months, he said. "What changed?" I asked. "A 2-digit error in an account number. 5 years of my life, 3 boys without a father, 2 digits. You should have come sooner." I said, "I know, they started school." Min-jun lost his first tooth. I know. Soo-hyun, I asked. "Gone," he said. "Permanently?" I looked at him across that small table. "I need conditions," I said. "Name them," he said. I called Aunt Lassetti from the parking lot. "Bring the boys, all 3, and through the cafe window I watched Dong-wook sitting alone, staring at his hands. It was the only time I had ever seen him look afraid. That was what made me believe him. Teo walked in first and pointed directly at Dongwook across the cafe. Mama, that is the man from yesterday. Dongwook stood. Minjun stayed close to me. Teo crossed the room without hesitation. And Seoyeon stood still beside me, looked at the stranger, then looked up. Mama, he has my eyes. I breathed through that one. Yes, baby, he does. Nothing about the weeks that followed was easy. Dongwook came every day. Teo adopted him immediately, dragging him to the mango tree within the first week. Minjun took 3 weeks to speak to him directly, then suddenly opened like a door, showing him football cards with the gravity of classified information. Seoyeon watched for a full month. Then one evening he sat across from Dongwook at the kitchen table and asked, "Why didn't you come before?" Dongwook put his book down. I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong person. I lost time I cannot give back. Are you leaving again? No. How do I know? You don't. Not yet. You watch and you are very good at watching. Seoyeon looked at the book. Is that Korean? Yes. Read some to me. I stood in the hallway and almost managed not to cry. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning, I watched Dongwook in my backyard, Minjun correcting his football technique, Teo commentating from the mango tree, Seoyeon sitting with Aunt Lessetti, slowly, reluctantly smiling. Dongwook looked up and found me through the window. I pressed my palm to the glass. He dipped his head once. I thought I buried this life in Seoul. I was wrong. The truth was 3 boys in a backyard in Pretoria. A man who spent 3 years becoming someone worth finding. And me choosing, still choosing, always choosing. That is enough.